What's going on, everybody? Kalipa's Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a comparison between two different generations of the Motorola Moto G Power, the Moto G Power 2022 and the Moto G Power 2021. Now, before we go any further, I do want to remind you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It helps out the channel a lot. And if you want to learn more about either of these phones, be sure to check out my full reviews and tips and tricks videos for them as well. But with all that being said, let's get started. So the Moto G Power 2022 has a 6.5-inch 90Hz IPS LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 270, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and a screen-to-body ratio of about 79.7%. Now, despite the screen-to-body ratio being slightly under 80%, the bezels don't really look too thick, and I do think this phone has a nice, sleek, modern look, and I really like the placement of the front-facing camera versus the Moto G Power 2021, where it's a little off to the side. Now, while this doesn't really look bad, I do like it in the middle a little bit better. Now, with that being said, this front-facing camera is 8 megapixels, so definitely not bad. Overall, I do like the quality of the display. Despite only being 720p, the image is pretty sharp and crisp, the colors look really nice, and the display in general is overall pretty bright. The Moto G Power 2021 has a 6.6-inch IPS LCD display with a resolution of 720p, a PPI of 266, an aspect ratio of 20:9, and a screen-to-body ratio of 83.8%. So the bezels are a little bit thinner on the 2021, and in addition to that, the screen is slightly larger too. The difference isn't so huge that you can easily tell, but that is something to keep in mind if you're looking for a larger display for content consumption, because of course a larger display, even by a really incremental amount, is still going to make somewhat of a difference. Now, another difference between these two to keep in mind is that the Moto G Power 2022 has a 90Hz display, and the Moto G Power 2021 has the standard 60Hz display. Now, the difference this is going to make is that the movement on the screen of the Moto G Power 2022 is going to be a little bit faster and smoother than that of the Moto G Power 2021. Now, you probably can't really tell in this video, but when you're doing content consumption like playing a game, streaming videos, stuff like that, you are going to be able to tell a little bit. And in addition to that, when you're just navigating through the phone, it's going to have a little bit more of a premium feel with the Moto G Power 2022 with that 90Hz display. Whereas with the Moto G Power 2021, although it's still going to be pretty good, it's not going to be quite as smooth and it's not going to have that same higher end feel. Now, other than that, as far as the quality of the image goes, I do think they're pretty much the same. So if you're doing any kind of content consumption, these phones are going to be great options. And with the 20:9 aspect ratio both of these phones have, that taller and more narrow form factor is going to make them great for reading. So if you're reading an article or even a book or something like that, you're not going to have to scroll quite as much because more stuff is going to fit on the screens than other phones that might not be as tall. Now, both of these phones also have decently slim designs, so despite having displays that are more on the larger side, they're not going to be uncomfortable to hold in your hand or carry in your pocket. Now, for storage, the Moto G Power 2022 is getting 64 gigabytes of internal storage with microSD card expansion, and the Moto G Power 2021 is getting 32 gigabytes of internal storage, also with microSD card expansion. Now, keep in mind, this is not the only variant. There's also another variant of the Moto G Power 2021 that has 64 gigabytes as well, but the Moto G Power 2022, to the best of my knowledge, doesn't have a 32 gigabyte variant, and I am glad that they got rid of that, because in this day and age, even for the average user, 32 gigabytes is really not going to be a whole lot. Even if you're doing minimal activities on your phone, if you like taking photos and shooting videos and stuff like that, or even just have a lot of data from your messages, or maybe you have a few apps here and there, you're really going to go through that storage pretty quickly. So with the Moto G Power 2022, that's 64 gigabytes, having double the storage of this specific version of the Moto G Power 2021 in my hand is going to have a huge advantage here. But again, if you are with a carrier that does happen to offer the 64 gigabyte version of the Moto G Power 2021, or maybe you get the factory unlocked version, that could work too, then they will be equal, because again, not every variant of the Moto G Power 2021 only has 32 gigabytes. But I would say if you had to make the choice between the Moto G Power 2022 and a version of the Moto G Power 2021 that did in fact only have 32 gigabytes, then clearly the Moto G Power 2022 is going to have a huge advantage and might be the better choice if you're doing more on your phone. And in addition to that, again, to the best of my knowledge, there is no version of the Moto G Power 2022 that only has 32 gigabytes, so that is an improvement I'm happy to see. Now for the security features, the Moto G Power 2022 has both face unlock and a fingerprint scanner located right back here on the rear. Now with the Moto G Power 2021, this phone also has face unlock and a fingerprint scanner right here on the power key. Now typically it seems that people tend to like the fingerprint scanner on the power key a little bit better, so depending on whether or not you are one of those people, it might be a little bit of a downgrade having the fingerprint scanner moved to the back with the Moto G Power 2022. Now, I personally don't really have a preference either way. I can definitely appreciate both because having the fingerprint scanner on the power key can be really convenient since you're probably going to be touching the button to wake up the display anyway, unless of course you have something like tap to wake on, but that's a whole different story. But on the other hand, I really do like the classic convenience of having the fingerprint scanner right here on the rear. I think that that's really nice too, so it doesn't really make a whole lot of difference to me. But if you do have a stronger preference between the two, definitely keep this in mind. Now with that being said, we're going to go ahead and give these fingerprint scanners a try and see how well they work. So we're going to start with the Moto G Power 2022. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, this fingerprint scanner is real fast and responsive. No issues here. So moving on to the Moto G Power 2021. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So both of these fingerprint scanners work really well. And again, of course, you have face unlock on both of them. So either way, there's not really a whole lot of a difference. It really, again, just comes down to where you like your fingerprint scanner. If you want it on the power key, of course, the Moto G Power 2021 is going to have an advantage. But if you're fine with having it on the rear, then the Moto G Power 2022 is going to be perfectly fine as well. Now taking a look at the rear camera setups here, the Moto G Power 2022 has a 50 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera for portrait mode, and a 2 megapixel macro camera. The Moto G Power 2021 has a 48 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera for portrait mode. So they have pretty much the same camera setup, and the photo quality is honestly almost the exact same as well. So there's really not a whole lot of a change between the Moto G Power 2021 and the Moto G Power 2022 in terms of camera. But aside from that, I do think both these phones have great camera setups. Of course, if you compare them to the quality of a photo taken by a $1,000 flagship phone, it'll be a completely different story because neither of these phones are going to get close to that level. But for normal everyday use, a few photos for social media or something like that you really want to keep, you're definitely going to be able to get some good photos with these phones. Now both of these phones are also able to shoot video in 1080p in both the rear and front cameras, although I wouldn't really recommend either of them for actual serious videos, just because the quality isn't the greatest. And the audio quality, being that the microphones for these phones aren't really good for anything besides phone calls, I wouldn't expect to get very good videos on these phones. So if you're actually creating content, whether it's for YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, whatever the case may be, if you're trying to make videos that you actually want to keep for something, again, I wouldn't recommend these phones. The video features are usable, but they're really not going to be very great by any means. But if you're just making videos for Snapchat or something like that, where the quality really isn't very relevant, then they should hold up just fine. Now internally, the Moto G Power 2022 is getting 4 gigabytes of RAM with the MediaTek Helio G37 processor. The Moto G Power 2021 is getting 3 gigabytes of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 662 processor. So technically the Moto G Power 2022 with that extra gigabyte of RAM does have a little bit of an advantage there. 4 gigabytes of RAM for an entry-level phone like this is pretty impressive, but I will say before even going over any type of tests, the Qualcomm Snapdragon 662 that's in the Moto G Power 2021 is definitely going to be significantly better than the MediaTek Helio G37. Now, does that mean the Moto G Power 2022 has a bad processor? Not necessarily, but as you're going to see in a moment, it is a little bit of a downgrade. So with that being said, I did run Geekbench 5 benchmark tests on both of these phones, and the Moto G Power 2022 came back with a single core score of 183 and a multi-core score of 1027. Now the Moto G Power 2021 on the other hand came back with a single core score of 306 and a multi-core score of 1370. So you can definitely tell here, there is a significant difference between the two. In performance-wise, I definitely will say, I have noticed it doing normal tasks with the phones. So browsing the web, going on social media, even playing a few games, there's definitely going to be a huge difference here. While the Moto G Power 2022 can do that stuff alright, except for playing games, I probably wouldn't try to do anything too graphics heavy on this. You can go on social media, browse the web, do some daily activities like sending text messages, making calls, that sort of thing, and use some more basic apps. But with the Moto G Power 2021, not only are games and more graphics heavy kinds of things going to run a little bit better on this phone, but it's also going to do pretty much everything noticeably faster. Now this is honestly too bad because with new phones, you expect the newer model to be a little bit faster at least than the older model, but unfortunately, as you can see here, that's not the case. Now keep in mind that this is going to be still a marginal difference. I will say I have definitely noticed this difference just using the phones myself, but it's not going to be anything like comparing the Moto G Power 2022 to say an iPhone 13 Pro Max. It's not going to be that drastic, but all I'm saying is it's still going to be noticeable. So if you are typically on your phone quite a bit more than the average person, then I would definitely say the Moto G Power 2021 is going to have an advantage for you. But if you're just doing the bare minimum, like sending text messages, making calls, that sort of thing, and you're browsing the web and using social media a little bit more sparingly, then the Moto G Power 2022 is going to be fine for you. And all the other advantages the Moto G Power 2022 has had over the 2021 so far might outweigh this difference in performance. Now for battery, both these phones have the same size battery at 5,000 milliamp hours, and this, as always, is a great battery. The Moto G Power lineup has always really had a lot of battery life, and the Moto G Power 2022 is no exception, so that's always good to see. If you're looking for a phone that's going to have a ton of battery life throughout the day and lots of longevity down the road, either of these phones are going to be great options. Unfortunately, neither of them have wireless charging, and seeing that some pretty low-end phones lately have been getting that feature, like the Visible Midnight for example, that's a $100 phone that actually does have wireless charging. I am kind of hoping that the Moto G Power 2023, when it comes out next year, might end up actually having that feature, but for right now, neither of these phones do have wireless charging, and honestly, that probably shouldn't really come as much of a surprise. In addition to this, neither of these phones have NFC. Now, I'm not sure of the international variants of these phones, but these phones in my hands unfortunately don't have NFC. And that is a little disappointing because NFC is getting more and more important as time goes on. In case you don't know what it is, NFC is the technology behind contactless mobile payment services like Google Pay. And without NFC, of course, you're not going to be able to use that feature on your phone. So if that's a feature you use constantly, definitely keep this in mind because it's not going to be possible to use it with these phones. So in conclusion, which of these phones is actually better? Honestly, this is pretty close. I would say for the most part, the real advantage the Moto G Power 2021 has over the 2022 is the processing power, and then maybe if you want to count the 0.1 inch difference in the display size. I personally don't really even see it that much, but technically the Moto G Power 2021 not only has a larger display, but also thinner bezels overall. So if you want a slightly bigger display, then the Moto G Power 2021 is going to have an advantage here. But I personally think the 90Hz refresh rate the Moto G Power 2022 has does outweigh that slight difference. So overall, in my honest opinion, I do think these phones are more or less the same, which is kind of a disappointment because usually you would expect the newer version of a phone to be significantly better than the older version. But unfortunately, although the Moto G Power 2022 does have some noticeable advantages over the Moto G Power 2021, I really think the differences are so marginal that really whether or not you should get one over the other is probably going to come down to what deals you can get. If one of them is being offered for free at your carrier, then I probably would go with that one because there are a few advantages both of these phones have that I personally would be fine with giving up in favor of a better deal. The one exception goes to the storage. If you're deciding between these two phones and the only version of the Moto G Power 2021 that's available is the one that has 32 gigabytes of internal storage, then I would definitely go for the Moto G Power 2022 because I personally need at least 64 gigabytes if not more. But if that doesn't concern you, or if the Moto G Power 2021 with 64 gigabytes is available when you're making your choice, then it's really going to come down to personal preference and which one is a better deal. And of course, if you want more processing power, in that case, I would say the Moto G Power 2021 is going to be a better option. But really, in the grand scheme of things, the difference is going to be pretty marginal. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you found this information useful as well. If you did, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And as always, I will see you in the next video.